Okay, welcome back to Chess Openings with the good Dr. Dave Regis, who's been kind enough to allow me to turn his free ebook into video clips for you. And last time we were looking at the Alapin variation of the Sicilian Defence. Here it is, a nice opening that the computer likes, says it's perfectly okay for white, that avoids all of the theory and book knowledge that improving players might have to learn on the more traditional Sicilian variations, and fits in quite nicely. Sorry, there was someone outside the flat window then. I just heard a noise. Don't know if you picked that up on the microphone. And it fits in quite nicely with the idea of an early c3 and d4, which was what we were doing against e4, e5. So, okay, there was plenty more of that in the previous video in this playlist. If you haven't seen it, feel free to go back and have a look. But for now, we've got 5 more games in the Alapin variation of the Sicilian. And our first one is from the Slovakian Championship in 1998. Kajan, maybe Kajan, I don't know, versus Majaros. Okay, so black in this position plays d5, which I think is probably the best move. And pawn takes d5. We did establish in the last video that white can just slide past as well as a safe option and alternative, but that's not what we're looking at in this repertoire. So takes, and knight f3 this time from white. In most of the other games, we've seen d4 first, but nothing wrong with putting the knight out first, not least because after knight f6, d4 comes next. Anyway, and in this game, black pins the white knight, which is perfectly reasonable. White unpins with bishop e2, e6 from black to get this bishop developed and then presumably castle. And this is fine. White's plus 0.5-ish, which is pretty solid from the opening. It's kind of what you'd expect, give or take. But bishop g5, not the best move. It's not awful. Position's still level, but not the absolute best move. We'll come back and look at what the alternatives were in a sec. A bishop e7 from black, and now white plays bishop takes, and bishop takes from black. And now I'm going to just turn the lines off because we're getting close to the stage where the mistake is coming, and I want you to be able to have a little go at finding it. So pawn takes and queen takes. And this falls foul of a pretty simple tactical trick. So if you want to have a quick go at finding the correct next move for white, feel free to hit pause, but I'll just carry on in 3, 2, 1. And the point here is that black's forgotten this bishop is no longer defended. The knight has gone from this square f6. So this bishop is what's known as potentially hanging. And so queen to a4 check not only attacks the king, but also attacks the bishop. So black would have to do something to get out of check, perhaps put the knight in the way. And then white just is a full piece up. Because we're going to use this opening a little bit, or at least that's the idea. The whole point of these videos is for you guys to be able to use the opening just to go back to this position, put the computer back. Bishop g5 has played in the game. Not the best move, although it turned out okay. It wasn't awful either, but the computer, not surprisingly, is recommending castles, or bishop to e3, lending some strength to these two squares, or just h3, kick the bishop and make white make a decision. So okay, but perfectly okay for both sides, actually, right up until the point of the blunder. Game 2. So good luck me with the pronunciation here. We've got a game from the Oberliga in Bayern. So we're in Germany in 1996. And white is a player called Korashkevich, I think. And black is Schweter. So here we go. And we have e4, c5, and c3, and once again d5. We will look in the other 3 games at some alternatives to d5 as well. And takes, and this time d4 from white. Knight to f6, knight to f3, so very, very similar to the previous game, bishop to g4. And this time, instead of putting the bishop in the way, which is fine, white plays knight b to d2 and supports the knight in a different way. And actually, that's okay. The computer's not hating that at all. Still tiny, tiny advantage to white. I mean, to the point where that's basically level. E6 from black, because again, you've got to develop this bishop. And one of the advantages of this knight being here is white's next move is possible. And it's bishop to c4, and it attacks the queen. And of course, the knight defends the bishop from here. In the previous video on the Alapin, the white had played knight to a3, which also meant the bishop was able to come here. So bishop to c4 is played. And I'm going to turn the line off now because we're getting close to mistake time. And Dr. Dave writes here in his text, black thinks white bishop takes queen. Yeah, sorry, I need to play another move first or this won't make sense. So black plays bishop takes. And then, yeah, black thinks white bishop takes queen. Black bishop takes queen. White king takes bishop. Black knight takes bishop. What else could happen? Well, let's see what else can happen. White does take the queen. Black does take the queen. But here, white doesn't play king takes bishop. There's a bigger prize available. And the correct move is actually to take here, because this rook is now completely trapped and must die. And of course, the rook is worth 5. This bishop only worth 3. So that is rather unpleasant. And in fact, in the tournament game where this took place, black resigned at this point. So yeah, absolutely very nice. And what black should do in this position, of course, is just retreat the queen. Yeah, don't fall for the trap. The queen, the computer's saying, where can you put the queen? C6, D7, D8. Sorry, D6, D7. It eventually actually will suggest D8 as well, I suspect. But basically, don't leave your queen here and don't play bishop takes knight. And the game would be pretty level. Okay, 2 down, 3 to go. And this one is from Slovakia again. We're back in Slovakia, but 1999 this time. And we have the white player Zegi, not sure if I've said that right, and against Podhorski. So, okay, so here we go again, E4, C5, C3. And in this game, black plays D6. And I suspect junior players, improving players, intermediate players will see this a lot. And the reason I suspect that is because in the normal Sicilian, white plays knight f3 is the main line and d6 is the most common next move. And I suspect that a lot of players, when faced with the Sicilian Alapin, will not really know what to do and will just decide to play what they were going to play against knight f3. And why not? I mean, d6 is not awful. It's clearly not awful. Why would it be? It's, you know, it's a central pawn. It lets the bishop get out to somewhere, whatever. It's not a bad move, is it? And white continues with d4. The whole point of this is to take the big center, so fine. Knight to f6 from black, developing a piece. White develops a piece. Black develops a piece. Nice, simple, sensible stuff. Knight e2 from white, which is interesting. So it obviously defends d4, but doing it from e2 instead of f3, which will give white that possibility of f3 or maybe f4, especially after castling. So just maybe a bit more flexible than playing knight to f3, but clearly both perfectly good moves. Pawn takes pawn from black, pawn takes pawn from white, and all level enough at the minute. Bit of an advantage to white, says the computer, but again, not, you know, shattering, especially not at below a certain level. Plus 0.7 is basically level. Queen to b6 from black. So we've now got 2 pieces attacking this square, only 1 defending. And this queen also hits b2, which means it's difficult for white to develop the bishop now because the queen's pressurizing the pawn. Having said all that, just over plus 1. So computer thinks this is pretty good news for white. Knight b to c3 just ignores this pawn. That's interesting. I wonder if I smell a trap heading in the direction of this game. E6 from black, and white castles, again ignoring this pawn. There is a trap heading in the direction of this game. I can see it heading down the tracks towards us. Bishop to e7. I'm going to turn the lines off now so the trap doesn't appear. A3, and finally black can't resist the bait anymore. Just to note, in this position, slight advantage to white, +1, so white a bit better, mainly because of the big center and the space that it confers on white and the safer king, but you know, it's okay. Right up to the point where black plays knight takes pawn. And away goes the bar. Oh dear. Knight takes knight from white. queen takes knight from black, and black must be thinking that they're happily a pawn up. Well, the bar is saying +10, so that's telling us that there's a problem here. And so if you want to find the problem, press pause now. Otherwise, I'm going to carry on with the video in 3, 2, and 1. And the problem here is that these two queens are lined up. And this bishop, if it goes to b5, will be giving check. Black will have to get out a check, and then their queen will die. So let's see this. Bishop to b5, check. Black has to do something to escape the check. Let's say, for example, they block with the bishop, and then white can play queen takes queen and be a queen up. Or, if they really feel so inclined, bishop takes bishop check first, black recaptures, and now take the queen. Either way, white is comfortably winning the game. Not much reason to go back on that one particularly, but we'll do it just very quickly. At this point where black plays pawn takes pawn, I think you're going to find that the computer just recommends developing moves. Yeah, so the computer's saying black should just play e6, probably bishop d7, g6, these kinds of moves with slight advantage to white. So, okay, fine. Okay, let's get another board. We've got 2 more games. Now, we don't have names for the players in this one, but we do have checkmate in 10. Ouch. So we've got e4, c5, and c3, and this time knight to c6. And same applies here, by the way, as I said in the last one. Knight f3, d6 is probably the most common reply. Well, actually, it is the most common reply. But I think you'll find knight c6 is not a million miles behind, probably the second most common. And so the same applies. A confused Sicilian player against this might just go and play what they were going to play anyway. And so knight c6. And we just carry on with the plan, d4. There it is. The classic Dave Regis plan, as I'm going to call it. Good old Dr. Dave. Just take the center. That's the whole point. Well, black captures, white captures, and black plays d5, strikes back in the center, which seems perfectly reasonable. Potential for an isolated queen's pawn position here, but actually it works really well for white on this occasion. So what happens is in our game, white plays knight to c3, develops a piece. Black plays this, thinking, I guess, that there's 2 pieces now striking at d4. But instead of recapturing and allowing the loss of this pawn, white actually plays the right move, d5. And one of the things that you'll, I won't say always, you'll frequently want to do if you have the isolated queen's pawn position, a bit more about that in the previous video, by the way, is try to advance the thing. Because if you get lumbered with it at the endgame, it might be a weakness. Okay, fine. So d5 straight away from white is very, very useful, attacking the black knight, which has to go somewhere. Knight to e5. And now, of course, this diagonal is open, so white's able to play queen to a4 check, which also forks this pawn. So white's got their pawn back. Bishop to d7 from black, blocking the check. Now, I just want to point out at this moment that even after queen takes pawn, it's a slight advantage white, pretty level game, you know, nothing to write home about. Well, queen takes, we're attacking the knight. Black's got to do something with the knight, and black plays the top engine move, knight to g6. I'm just going to turn that off now because in a moment here comes the disaster. And then white plays a cunning move, plays knight to b5. And black can't play bishop takes knight because after bishop takes bishop, we see this pattern again with the check on the white squares. And the only thing black can do to block it is not that, which would be illegal, but queen to d7. And then, of course, bishop takes queen. So black doesn't go for that. Instead, black sees a white queen in the middle of the board and thinks, well, I can develop a piece. At the same time, I can attack the white queen. What's more natural than that? Well, watch the bar. Total disaster. For those who want to just find the next move for white, it's not exactly the most difficult move in the world, but it's quite pretty. Feel free. Otherwise, we're going to carry on in 3, 2, and 1. And the correct move is the rather nice smothered mate, knight to d6 checkmate. Black king can't move because he's completely surrounded by his own teammates. And this pawn cannot go here because it is pinned. If I try, the computer makes a nasty noise at me and flashes the black king in red because queen takes king is a problem. Ouch. Ouch, indeed. If we just go back to this position and say slight advantage to white, black shouldn't really swap the pawns, although it's not awful. Computer's probably recommending e6, is it? Yeah, top move e6, just defend the center. Okay, fine. All right, we've got one more to go, and I think this is what I'm beginning to call a Dr. Dave Regis special. I just don't know where he finds these games. So we have here Sinesh Marisol versus Scala, and this is the Argentinian Championship from 2001, the under-18 girls section. I'm speechless at Dr. Dave's database. He must have like the best copy of Chess Base ever or something to find all of this stuff. Anyway, let's see how the game goes. So e4, c5 and c3, and we've got another game with d6. Obviously, we're going to play d4 because that's the whole point. And in this situation, black tries something really a little bit unexpected. Okay, e5. Computer doesn't think a great deal of it, +1 and a bit. Okay, computer not a fan of the move e5, but it's an interesting try. We're having a big old fight for d4 now, aren't we? Look, everything in sight is attacking d4. And white feels that something else should attack d4 as well and plays knight to f3. So what a load of tension in the middle of the board. Black eases that with a swap. White swaps. And queen to c7 from black. Computer not a big fan of the black position now. +2. It's a handy advantage for white. Handy positional advantage. So knight to c3. White just carries on developing as you would. Why not? Knight to f6 from black carries on developing, as you would. Bishop to g5 from white carries on developing. None of this is controversial. Knight b to d7 carries on developing. We've got a problem. All of a sudden, nearly +5. Rook c1 from white. Now, this is classic, lining up the rook on the open file against the enemy king. And black doesn't do anything about this. And, you know, I mean, black is in some trouble anyway here, positionally. But black plays a6. And white doesn't immediately play knight to b5 or knight to d5, uncovering the attack on the queen. Plays queen to d2 first. Not sure why, really. It's probably not the best move. And then pawn takes from black. And it's at this point that black in the actual game was met with knight d5 from white. And this is just horrible. The rook is now attacking here. The queen is going to have to move, and then the knight can come to this square, which is a fork on the king and the rook. This is just horrible, horrible stuff. Yes, so resignation happened, but the top moves according to the engine. The best that black could do is knight takes knight. White's going to obviously take the queen, and the knight takes back, and white recovers the pawn. And what have we got here? Well, we've got 6 pawns for each side, and black will have a knight and a rook trying to take on the enemy queen, which in theory is 8 points of material versus 9 points of material. But yeah, with none of these pieces really active at the moment, and the black king still stuck in the middle, big positional advantage for white. So, okay, that ends our look at the Sicilian Alapin variation. Let's go back to the start position just so we can see what's what. So what we've done here, we've avoided having to learn all of the main lines, which is really good because there's lots of them. And we've got an element of consistency in our approach with the early c3, d4, which is kind of cool. So it fits in quite nicely with what we've already learned. The next video that we're going to look at is how to play, according to Dr. Dave, against the Caro-Kann defense, against the super solid Caro-Kann defense. So we will have a little bit of a look at that in the next episode. But for now, thanks for watching, and see you all soon.